Greetings, loves. It is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Recently, I attended InRange's High Desert Brutality 2-gun competition. That was a very difficult competition that involved a lot of good firearm handling skills, as well as just general physical challenges for my body. A lot of folks had some really good questions about training, so I just kind of wanted to do an overview about how I approach training, how I set goals, how I evaluate, how I approach firearm handling, as well as just keeping good fitness. So in this video, I'm going to review what I do. This is not necessarily a template for you to follow, but it might be some good inspiration and just some general thought and theory around training for you to try to digest. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now first, let's talk about training theory. For me personally, I identify my capabilities, my strengths, and my weaknesses. You have to set a baseline. You have to know where you're at in order to set some goals. Then you set some goals for training. Make sure that they're realistic, achievable, and set a good time frame for you to be able to get there. Finally, you then train. You find things that are useful to do to get you to where you want to go. Execute those exercises, those drills, whatever you have, and make sure that you're doing that on a regular schedule that is realistic and easy to implement in your life. Once you get that done, you feel like you're skilled up and trained up, you then need to evaluate, see what your skills are doing for you, and see where you need to go from there. And then this whole entire process simply repeats. I need to stress here that you have to be very realistic and honest with yourself when you're coming up with a training regimen. Again, going back to the beginning here, start with that baseline and make sure that you understand that baseline thoroughly. You need to have data to be able to do that. So use shot timers, use stopwatches, use whatever you have, count your reps, log things, and make sure that you understand exactly where you're at so that you can better set achievable goals. When you're setting these goals, you gotta be really realistic and you gotta work up incrementally. If you run a 7-minute mile, don't set yourself up for failure by trying to set the next goal at 5 minutes. That's not incremental. Work up from there, set yourself up to get to a 6-minute and 45-second mile, and continue to try to push yourself and reevaluate and improve upon your training regimen from there. You've got to be realistic here. Do not set yourself up for failure because it will be very discouraging and it's not going to help you at all. Now, first and foremost, I want to talk about physical training because I think it's actually probably one of the most important things when it comes to using a firearm. Whether that's a handgun or a rifle, being able to run and gun, being able to move quickly, being able to operate your firearm under stress, and be able to actually manage the weight of the gun and not get tired while you're using the gun are all really, really physical aspects of firearm usage, and you should be training within your means. It's really important to cover all of your bases here, and physical training is a huge one. Do not underestimate this. So here, let me just talk about what I generally do when I approach physical training. When it comes to physical training, it's important to understand that your body is the weapon and your body does come first. Yes, firearms are cool, they're fun and all, but honestly, if you're not taking good care of yourself, then what's the point of any of that? Make sure that you're taking really good care of your body. Keep it nourished and keep it rested. The first thing to be sure of is to just make sure that you're well hydrated. Drink water, you dummy. Your body is 70% water. You gotta keep it at that level. You can't dehydrate yourself while you're working out because you're simply just gonna fall short. You're gonna be extra tired earlier than you'd want to be. It's just not gonna be good. So make sure that you're hydrating, especially before you exercise as well as after. Make sure that you have a steady intake of water throughout the day in your day-to-day activities too. It's just generally just good for you. I shouldn't have to harp on this. You all know this. Another thing that's really important is, of course, diet. This is really basic and this is just general life advice, but make sure that you're eating plenty of fruits and vegetables for good vitamin intake. But in terms of physical training, you're also going to want to consider a high protein diet of some sort. Your muscles are going to get worn out, you're going to need to rebuild them, and you're going to build on top of them. So your protein intake should be very high, relatively speaking, of course. I'm vegan, so I definitely need to make sure of that, and I take a protein supplement whenever I work out, and in general, and I also have a collagen supplement to assist with joints and all of that. So I'm not really any sort of dietitian. I can't tell you what's good for you and your body and your regimen. You might want to contact a dietitian and get some more tailored advice for you, but there are just some good practices here that I'm trying to outline. Another really important aspect is rest. Make sure that you're resting plenty before any sort of physical activity and also after. Make sure that you have energy stored up so you can accomplish the task at hand, of course, but also after any event or physical training, you need to make sure that you're recovering from that and that you're giving your body time to regenerate and restore from said physical activity. In fact, I actually experienced what a lack of sleep will do at a competition environment when I went to high desert brutality. Because of factors that were out of my control, I had car trouble and I got into town super late and I only got a couple hours of sleep before I woke up super early to get to that event. And my stage planning was really going out the window. I was not focused or thinking very clearly, and I was just generally running slower than I normally would. That's regrettable, and obviously you can't always control this, but do make sure that you're resting very well before any activity as well as after, of course. Next, let's actually get down to brass and tacks about physical fitness and how I approach that. Now, first of all, I'm not a physical trainer. I cannot tell you what is good for you and your body and what goals you're trying to reach and how you should accomplish them. That is something that is extremely personal. I'm just giving you an example here of the things that I do. Furthermore, I do want to touch on mobility. People have all sorts of different mobility issues and limitations that I don't necessarily experience, and so I can't speak for you when it comes to these matters. Obviously, work within your means, work out what you can, but also respect your body, take good care of it, and don't go out injuring yourself because you're pushing yourself beyond your own means. That's generally just good fitness advice, but it's also really important to respect the limitations of your own body and work within your means. I cannot stress that enough. Again, I want to stress the training theory that I mentioned before. It definitely applies here. Be sure to set a realistic baseline for yourself that is measured and understood clearly. Then set some goals that are very easily achievable for yourself. Try to meet those goals through your training and exercise, and then evaluate where you're at and repeat that process. I know I'm repeating myself here, but it really bears repeating because a lot of people put themselves out in the deep end, they get frustrated, they get discouraged, and then they just kind of give up. And that's not what we want to do here. We want to make sure that we're being realistic and working within our means. Now, when it comes to physical fitness, it's really important that you stretch before you do any physical activity. Identify what needs to be stretched out in terms of how you're moving in each exercise, and accordingly tailor your stretches around that. You need to make sure that everything is nice and loose and that you're not potentially setting yourself up to get injured by exercising. That's a hell of a way to stunt on yourself, and it's really not cool. There's not even a good story that's going to go with that injury. It's just going to suck. So make sure that you're stretching before you work out. I also do have to say that you may want to consider yoga in your regimen. Yoga is not the be-all end-all of everything, and I actually don't do it very often, but I found it very beneficial when I have. For one, it stretches you out, but two, it makes you have better balance, it does build strength, and it's generally just a good de-stressing activity, which is a really nice added benefit. People do yoga for all sorts of reasons, but it's a really good holistic activity, and it may be something that you want to incorporate into your regimen. Another really important thing is cardio. Cardio, honestly, to me is probably the most important aspect of fitness. If you don't have good cardio, then you aren't really doing any favors for yourself in all the other respects. You're going to be strong maybe, but you're not going to be able to have good endurance, and you're not going to be able to move quickly or have the ability to not get winded. All that stuff really, really matters when you're doing anything physical. So make sure that you're staying on top of your cardio. Personally, I run twice a week. I traditionally have ran a mile each time, just trying to get my mile time as low as I possibly can. But lately, after reviewing some of my footage and my lessons from things like high desert brutality, I realized that I tend to jog through stages, and while my endurance is really good and I don't get winded, I don't really move as quickly as I would like to. So lately, I've started to introduce sprinting as one of my cardio days, and that definitely is something that you might want to consider, especially if you're using explosive movement in things like a competitive environment. It's one thing to have high endurance and not get winded, but it's another thing to just jog through all those stages and move slowly regardless. So make sure that you have a variety of approaches to cardio. It doesn't just have to be running. You can ride a bike. That's really good for endurance. And you can jump rope, which is really good for cardio too, build up that endurance and also some coordination. Next, let's talk about strength training. Now, when it comes to firearm handling, Yes, you can sit at a bench all day and not use a single muscle almost, but that's not what most of us are doing. And when it comes to things like two-gun competitions where you're running and gunning and swinging a big heavy rifle and carrying a bunch of gear and ammo on you, you're going to get really tired if you're not very strong. So you definitely want to get as strong as you can within your means. Now, I generally would recommend that people try calisthenics as opposed to just weightlifting. For one, you can do it at home. You don't really need very much. I just use something like a pull-up bar to do a series of tasks. This thing is extremely versatile and extremely useful, and you can just stick it in your doorway, and you can do pull-ups, sit-ups, chin-ups. You can do all sorts of stuff with this. It's really, really handy. You can also use stuff like training resistance bands. I put these around my legs when I'm doing lunges and things like that. It just adds some extra resistance so that my workouts are a little bit more challenging and I'm really pushing my muscles. Also, kettlebells, really, really useful. Those are really handy for a number of workouts, and they are really good at full body workout activities. You can incorporate these into all sorts of movements that really get a lot of your muscle groups activated. Things like weightlifting can often be not very advantageous. It's often good for building vanity muscles, and if you are after that, then go hit the gym. But I mean, honestly, if you try to approach this from a more holistic approach and do a series of different kinds of exercises with minimal equipment, you're probably going to actually work out more muscle groups, and that's better in the long run. Now, this also doesn't require a gym membership, and again, you can do this all at home, and it's really easy. Now, personally, the way that I approach strength training is that I just take one day of the week and I worry about upper body workouts and my core. The next day, I worry about my legs. I go from the glutes down and work those out. I don't really cross anything over because I'm going to be needlessly tired. I want to make sure that I'm giving myself enough rest in between all these exercises and I'm not overlapping any of the exercises unnecessarily. Now, personally, I can't say what exactly I do to exercise every single day because that changes, and it changes for a good reason. I'll sometimes do a bunch of push-ups and chin-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups, and sometimes I'll go to kettlebell exercises because it's really important to not just keep doing the same exercises over and over again because, again, you're starting to isolate muscle groups and they're just not going to really get any of the benefits of having a fuller, stronger body. You're going to have certain muscles that are really good at certain things, and you're going to have other muscles that aren't worked out at all. So make sure that you're also switching up your exercises and make sure that you have a good diversity in your regimen. Also, endocrine note here, if you do have more estrogen than testosterone in your body, it's going to be doubly hard to get gains out of strength training, and that just is how it is. You are just simply going to need to work harder on this stuff than somebody who has more testosterone than estrogen in their body. Ask me how I know. If you do have more estrogen in your body than T, you're probably going to need to make sure that you're being very, very methodical in your strength training. Make sure that you keep it very regular, because if you miss a single week of it, you will definitely notice it and you will feel it. So definitely keep that in mind. When it comes to physical fitness, I hate to harp on it again, but being goal-oriented is extremely important. I cannot stress that enough. Be sure to measure your run times just like you do your drill times with a shot timer. Record those results. Make sure that you're setting realistic goals and that you are meeting them. Now, when it came to my performance at high desert brutality, my takeaway was that yes, I'm not the strongest person in the world. I'm not even the best shooter in the world. I definitely could stand to also throw some more kettlebells and work on my explosive movements so that I do just generally move faster and can sprint more. Those are all really important takeaways for sure, but the positive aspect that did reinforce my physical training was the fact that my physical endurance is extremely high. When I finished my last stage at high desert brutality, I was chipper and energetic and not in the slightest bit tired, which was absolutely crazy because I was running and gunning in the summer sun in the desert for 12 hours on a couple hours of sleep. So I wasn't really tired till the next day. It didn't hit me at all. I actually stayed up late in the hotel watching Ice Road Truckers on TV, and I did not feel in the slightest bit that exhausted. So physical training really does pay off. It is definitely a component of firearm handling. It is not something that you can neglect, and besides all that, it's good for you as long as you are being kind to yourself and taking good care of yourself in the process. don't neglect physical training. Moving on from fitness, let's get into talking about shooting guns, because that's what this channel is kind of about, and that's definitely what we're talking about when it comes to training as a component of it, at least. When it comes to training to actually shoot firearms well, most of that is actually not going to be done at the range. Unless you have unlimited money, time, resources, and ammo, you're probably not going to do all your training at the range. And in fact, for most people, you're going to do almost all of it in dry fire from the convenience of your home for free. That's definitely true for me, especially. I actually only had one range trip before I went to high desert brutality, and that was mostly just to zero my rifle and get my dope set and run a couple of quick drills, and otherwise I did everything in dry fire. Now, was that ideal? No, but I hope that demonstrates that you don't need to be going to the range all the time to get good at shooting guns. And yeah, I would have definitely benefited from more range trips, but at the very least, I generally make sure that I am dry firing every single day for at least 10 minutes, if not 30 minutes, when I'm getting ready for a competition. Now, I hate to beat you all over the head with this, but again, that training theory I mentioned earlier definitely applies in dry fire. Be sure that you get some measurements and some data of your drills and whatever you're running at the range. Take all that, identify what you need to work on, set some goals that are realistic and obtainable, and then identify some exercises and drills that are going to work in dry fire for you to get there. Finally, after you are done training in dry fire, you just go back to the range, you test everything, set the new baseline, and see where that took you, and then go from there. This process is one that will last you for your entire life as long as you shoot, or generally also when you just train to do anything, really. So make sure that you are very intentional and objective oriented when you approach your dry firing. When it comes to dry fire training, it's just really important to note that the main limitation here is that you just don't get recoil response to train around. That is the one thing that live fire is good at, but pretty much everything else that you could possibly train with a firearm can be done in the comforts of your own home. You can train for your ready ups, your draw times, your reloads, target transitions. You can even get really creative and set up move and shoot courses within your own home. The things that you can do at home in dry fire are nearly limitless in the scope of the greater skill set that you're working within. So definitely bear that in mind. Also, another really cool thing to do is to make it social. Dry fire with some friend or some loved one. Have them time you as you run your drills. Make sure that you get those data points in dry fire, because that's going to greatly enhance your overall capabilities and your ability to identify what you need to work on throughout your training. Finally, when it's time to hit the range, just make sure that you're taking all the lessons you learned from dry fire and applying them through drills and exercises at the range. You're just simply adding recoil to all of that, and you are then developing a whole picture of what you are actually capable of. In order to establish that baseline, you of course need to have measured results. So if you are running on a clock, make sure that you have a shot timer, of course. Make sure that you are focusing on not only accuracy, but time, because both of those things are equally important when it comes to handling a firearm, in my opinion. And furthermore, make sure that you are recording these results. You need to have some sort of ledger that shows your progress. You need to identify then from that what you need to work on in dry fire again. It's also really good to see your progress in general, because that's motivating and it will encourage you to keep doing what you're doing if you are seeing results. Also, when it comes to training at the range, if you can, get physical with it. Not only should you be trying to run and gun and introduce movement if you can, but also try to get more physical with it in the respect that you are actually making yourself physically tired. Try to wear yourself down a little bit. Try to get your heart rate up. You need to see how you do in stressful situations under duress, especially if you are training for self-defense. So make sure that you're incorporating physical exercises such as throwing kettlebells or flipping a big tire. It may look really silly, but honestly, these are great ways for you to measure just how you work under pressure. And when it comes to handling a firearm in potentially dangerous situations, we cannot ignore that part of the training, so do that as much as you can. Next, let's talk about loadouts. Training in your kit is kind of nice. It's kind of advantageous. It's good to be familiarized with your kit. It's good to understand how it feels, how it fits you, how it sits on your body, of course, and how you need to interact with it in your training. If you are doing dry fire, try to dry fire in your kit every once in a while. However, I think a lot of people overplay and overstate the importance of training in kit. It's not always a good idea. It can often distract from everything if it is inconvenient to put your kit on and you're just simply trying to work on your pistol reps. It's going to be unnecessary to be wearing a plate carrier for that. It just is. Now, I'm not saying that it's not good to do that. Again, it is good to do that, but it isn't necessary all the time. Isolate stuff in your activities, and if you are doing a gear-heavy activity, focus your exercises around the gear specifically. Focus on working your reloads if you have a chest rig or something like that. But don't needlessly just be putting your kit on just because you want to look cool. It's actually going to slow you down, it's going to discourage you from actually getting the gains that you need in your training, and it's just not going to be very useful for your focus in your training. Also, when it comes to working out, don't always do that in your kit either. In fact, I would generally discourage that because that's when you can really more seriously injure yourself, especially if you're wearing heavy things like helmets and plate carriers. That can compress your spine, it can do all sorts of damage. Now, I will sometimes go jogging with a plate carrier on, but that's extremely rare, and that's mostly just so that I can measure how I run in a plate carrier and how it feels. I don't try to make that a regular thing at all, and I strongly discourage you from doing such similar things because it generally is just bad for you. You can get all the gains you need in your fitness and your workout without your kit on. You can dry fire occasionally in your kit, and that will generally get you where you need to go. On the other hand, it is very important, obviously, to be familiar with your kit. Do definitely wear it, try things out, see what works, see what doesn't, see how it feels and fits, and go from there. Furthermore, you definitely should dry fire with it, but it should be targeted exercises that require you to use your kit in critical ways that you would depend on your kit for. Now, you should also probably try to attend an airsoft game, honestly. That's a great way of testing your kit, and in fact, the most I've ever learned about my kit is whenever I play airsoft, because I do depend on it. I'm put into a situation where I need my kit to keep myself going, and yeah, I'm slinging 6mm plastic BBs at people like 20 yards away, but regardless, the kit is there and it is being used. Furthermore, you can go rucking with your kit. It's not really that recommended that you go in full kit necessarily, but you can try out your backpack, you can try out certain accoutrements and accessories, and just see how that goes. See how you travel across land and terrain in your kit. That might be very important to you, so definitely consider that. Lastly, be sure that you're training with and learning from others. Make your training social. If there are people that you like to hang out with who want to train with you, definitely do so, because not only are you going to be getting all the gains from training, but you're going to be building ties with other people through training. And that's really powerful, and it's also really fun. Training can be grueling, it can be boring, it can be mundane, but if you make it social, it can make all of that just vanish, and you can simply just enjoy yourself while you're getting your gains. That's huge. Furthermore, be sure that you're training with people who are more capable and experienced than you. You're probably not going to get that much out of training with other people if they are less experienced than you or at your own level. Be sure that you are challenging yourself by learning good lessons from people who have them to give to you. Take classes from people. It doesn't even have to be somebody that you know or love, but be sure that you pay attention to the wisdom that they're trying to pass along to you. There's resources out there that are invaluable that will help a lot of shooters if they seek them out. So don't be afraid to learn from somebody who has more experience and capability than you. That's only a good thing. Furthermore, if you're training for self-defense, be sure that you're making it multidisciplinary. Training on one gun in one instance for one skill set is not going to be that great. Introduce things like martial arts, weapons retention training, and force on force. All of those things are going to really greatly enhance your skill set and just generally make you a more capable person in terms of self-defense. A multidisciplinary approach to self-defense means that you are more well-rounded for more situations that may arise, because there is one thing that's certain, and that's the uncertain. So be ready for everything that you can be as much as you can. And that wraps up my notes on training. These are just thoughts and ideas and theories that I apply to my training for my own benefit. This is by no means an edict or a template for you all to use. I'm just trying to describe to you my methodology so that you can use that as a springboard and inspiration for you to benefit yourself. Find out what works for you, work within your means, be realistic, be kind to yourself, but make sure that you are setting incremental goals that will get you where you want to go. I cannot do any of that for you. You need to do the hard work here, but I do hope that this was helpful. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. I also want to graciously thank everybody who is supporting this channel on Patreon. I could not do any of this without you. I don't make money off this channel in any other way, and in fact Patreon at best makes it so that I get near breaking even, and even that is just not usually enough. This is not a cheap endeavor. I don't really have any other support. I am just a one-girl show here. I do pretty much everything by myself, besides the nice ladies who film me at the range. So if you do want to go help out, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. Happy training! I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there, and as always, please take care. Bye!